right, good evening and welcome along to Business Today. Many thanks for joining us. I'm Jerome Paul Sonko with Winnie Wins and Akauchi on sign language. But first, a look at our top stories.
In Business Today, trade, tourism and the extractives industry to benefit from arrangement therein. Infrastructure Committee dismisses work of fishes as composition of pulps becomes pertinent. Nefri, Energy Ministry and other players integrate solar energy in fish farming.
All right, now we kick it off with the Ugandan High Commission in Pretoria, Presidential Advisory Committee on Export and Industrial Development, the PASAID, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs have today launched the Uganda-South Africa Trade, Tourism and Investment Summit that will be held in Pretoria. The two-day summit intends to widen market opportunities for both countries and for both investors in the private sector. We have more in this report.
Despite South Africa being a force in trade, majoring in the extractives such as gold for instance, that hasn't limited the African giant from blending into other markets such as Uganda's. Paul Amuru, the Uganda High Commission of South Africa, has expressed how trade between both countries intends to exploit agro-processing, mining, cybersecurity, tourism, among other areas. Through the Uganda-South Africa Investment Summit, bankable opportunities are to be unleashed.
Opportunities that as a mission we are seeing cover areas of agro-processing in the agro-processing sector, mining, fish, farming, virtual education, cyber security and data storage, tourism promotion partnerships, medical tourism, road networks, infrastructure, hotels, hospitality and vineyards. There are more. This is broader, and I think as we go in there and as you will see from the program, there will be opportunity for Uganda to make a case to present the bankable projects and the opportunities that we have to the government of South Africa and to the private sector, but there will also be opportunity for business-to-business engagements. The
volume of trade between Uganda and South Africa has been steadily growing, with the latest figures estimated at approximately $149 million, although over the years there has been fluctuations in export volumes. However, this summit aims at unlocking big numbers by fostering a balanced trade link and exploring investment opportunities to promote economic growth. The summit is not only focused on boosting trade between the two countries. Tourism is one avenue Uganda hopes to exploit, relying on the various tourist hotspots spread across the Pearl.
We have the tourism infrastructure that a tourist from Europe, from America, from Asia will come and appreciate in Uganda. So I think we can work together in this area. Our Ministry of Tourism runs training programs, and I know every year some Ugandans have attended those training programs that will assist our governments and our countries to reach the necessary standard.
As South Africa, among other challenges, struggles with the job market just like Uganda, the cost of trade has been a concern, as well as for many Ugandans in South Africa. Expectantly, many find this a ground to address it.
Costly because you need to have the good infrastructure. South Africa, because of the standards you've had on the press conference, everything they talk about, the standard is high. Whether it is the hospitals, that's why they are doing more in medical tourism, having Ugandans going there in terms of expertise. So I think it's quite costly in a Ugandan perspective to establish a business in South Africa compared to Uganda, because it requires a lot of capital investment, and secondly, the standards don't come cheap. They require a lot of capital injection and improvements, training, capacity building.
The investment summit is set to take place from February 27th to 28th, has created a crucial platform for government officials, business leaders, and investors to mix and explore investment opportunities that will drive economic growth. Martha Nimsima, Smart 24 TV, Business Today.
Right now, meanwhile, the Committee of Physical Infrastructure has resolved to send away officials from the Ministry of Works in charge of the standard gauge railway for failure to appear with the line ministers as well as permanent secretary. These had appeared to discuss the compensation process for people whose land is going to be taken over the railway. Samla Hanifa with the report.
On the 9th of March 2022, the Works Minister General Katumba Wamala presented a report to Parliament requesting for a financial support to fund compensation of the project-affected persons for the standard gauge railway. The SGR project is being executed on a $330 million loan structured for a repayment period between 25 and 50 years. 581.7 billion Ugandan shillings is currently needed for the compensation exercise. Today, officials from the Ministry of Works appeared before the Committee on Physical Infrastructure, but in absence of their supervisors, only to be met with resentment.
Wrote a letter to this MDA, Minister of Works, to come and appear before the committee and have a discussion about the standard gauge railway compensations. As you are aware, there are many issues surrounding compensation along the right of way, from all the way from Malaba to Kampala. So the committee wanted to clear it, and the committee wanted to exhaust in details the issues surrounding the compensation. Now, to do that, there must be our rules are very clear. There must be a political head or the PS.
Following the cancellation of the concession agreement with the Rift Valley Railways, underlying expenses and the case currently under arbitration at the London Court of International Arbitration, precedents in the railway project are currently considered by legislators to be crucial matters for discussion.
We are aware that government is so busy at the moment. Cabinet is sitting today. We are also aware that there are very many other activities that are going on with the budget and other things that need ministry officials to be aware. However, there are pertinent issues that we needed to discuss with the ministry. Actually, mainly it is because, one, compulsory acquisition of land, where the SGR is supposed to pass. Two is the valuation. People are complaining about how much money they are being given to, for their land. Three is we have a problem with customary land.
The committee vice chairperson informed us that internal discussions will be held to determine whether to meet officials from the Ministry of Works again and decide on the matter.
But as leadership of the committee, we are going to sit and get them another day for them to be able to appear and make a presentation.
Of the 1,266-kilometer track, just 20% is operable, and the track currently highlighted by occupancy in different activities. The total budget for the SGR project in this falling financial year is 26 billion shillings, yet reports worth 151.6 billion shillings are pending payment. Samlanifa, Smart 24 TV, Business Today.
All right, now many thanks for keeping it business today, as we are now definitely going to be looking at a review pretty much about the national budget, especially on the budget committee report on the budget framework paper for the financial year 2023-2024. That's briefly. It's a 50 trillion budget, which is yet to be approved by the committee and of course by Parliament. Better yet, up to 6.1 trillion of funding gap is in an unfunded priorities without definitive funding source. Now, when you look at the unrealistic majority report, tax exemptions actually totaling up to 588 billion Ugandan shillings in corporate tax, payers yuan, and then value-added tax as well, highlighted as a conduit of corruption. But besides that, joining me this particular evening to discuss more about this particular one on the report, furthermore, the budget framework paper, I have Madam Grace Namugambe, who is a tax expert at Seatini, Uganda. Good evening and many thanks for joining us, ma'am.
Good evening.
All right, pleasure is ours. If I may start with you from here, when we look at program versus sector in regards to the budgetary approach, is the current approach a better option? Because we have 20 programs and 50 trillion Ugandan shillings set aside for the next financial year.
I think the first thing is to assess how much we've so far achieved out of the program-based budgeting for the past 1 year, and looking into the factors to whether we as a country were actually ready to implement the program-based budgeting. We would say that it was a good idea to have the program-based budgeting, especially to see it as a way to have the different government ministries, departments and agencies working together to address particular issues. But I think there is still a challenge in terms of how some of the MDAs are working. Some of them are still working in silos, but also looking at the fact that at the local government level, it has not been entirely rolled out for them to implement the program-based budgeting. Some of the local governments that we've interacted with are still actually looking at the sector-based budgeting. And for us to assess as to whether this was, which is better, it would be good to have a critical analysis and weigh our gains and see as to whether the program-based approach is actually achieving what it sought to, what it had set out to achieve upon its launch.
Now, is there a rationale for the deficit budget amid its continuous inefficiency in the kind of revenue generation that we do have in the country?
I think from what we see right from the National Budget Framework paper, and even as we see the current status of the economy right now in terms of how much Uganda revenue has been able to collect even in this current financial year, the collections have still remained low and way below the target, and that means that we are likely to continue even in the next financial year, given the current economic situation. We are likely to see that we will continue having a deficit budget, limited revenue collections, and that means we get into a vicious cycle of debt, taking note of the fact that we still have that we've already had our debt to GDP ratio going up to about 53%, which is way above the minimum recommended threshold. So we think it's something that we need to look into to see how as a country we can equitably raise more revenue to avoid the deficit, but at the end of the day ensure that we're able to finance our budget.
All right, now, Madam Grace, when you look at this, we've got a loss of around 588 billion Ugandan shillings in tax exemptions to big companies. Now, 8 trillion loss annually to the exemptions and other expenditures all throughout. How damaging is this to the budgetary process in the country?
I think that is very damaging because, as pointed out earlier, the revenue loss definitely contributes to the large deficit that we register. So that means that because of these numerous tax incentives and exemptions, we then don't have enough resources for government to allocate to critical sectors like health, education, as well as productive sectors like tourism, agriculture, and so on. So what we've always called for is a clear guidelines to govern the award of tax incentives and exemptions, and for government to continuously evaluate some of the exemptions and incentives that it gives. And we definitely applaud government. I think they've recently been able to finalize a tax expenditures governance framework. We are yet to see what it looks like and how it will help in terms of curbing the loss that we are registering. But it's something for us to continuously think about and urge government to do, to look into the incentives regime. I know last year there was a debate on Parliament about the exemption to Bujagali power project, and there was need for for Parliament to have a report on that and see as to whether we were actually benefiting and whether the company would have to continue benefiting from this exemption. We are yet to see that come out, and I think generally there is need for us to streamline these exemptions, see who is gaining, assess how much we gain and lose.
I can't agree more on that particular one, but when you look at this other issue here, would a cap on government expenditure partly streamline the revenue and, of course, the expenditure in general?
I think a cap on government expenditure comes through the way we budget. At the budgeting point, there is need for government, the different MDAs, to see to it that they are putting in place realistic budgets that will be able to they will be able to work with and stick to throughout the year. So I know in some instances government has come up to say that there are issues that emerge that were unexpected. It's also about how we plan for unexpected occurrences like disasters and any other issues that would likely arise during a financial year. So a cap would definitely help, especially in terms of how much government is able to regulate its expenditure. And it would also definitely be useful in terms of seeing to it that we are able to maximize benefits from the little resources that we have.
And if you look at this also, one may ask, does Uganda need a debt fund in the wake of the growing debt stock? It is actually totaling up to 79 trillion Ugandan shillings.
A debt fund would likely constrain the economy further. I think we've also seen that during the next financial year, it's likely that there's going to be an increase in domestic refinancing, which means that is definitely going to impact the interest rates that are likely to go higher. So I think there is need to ensure that even as much as a country we are accruing debt, how are we utilizing it and how are we ensuring that we are doing so responsibly, and at the end of the day protecting the citizens and maximizing benefits and not simply paying off debt that has not been put to proper
And now let's talk matters mineral resources. When you look at the rate, which is highly recorded in regards to the corruption in the sector, for example, gold tariff previously did drop, and then it is actually now we also have the upcoming oil production. It's the big talk in town right now. And do you really feel like we may be bound to face the same when it comes to oil and gas production in the country if at all we don't deal with corruption?
I think corruption, especially within the extractive sector or mineral governance, stems from the fact that we've not had clear systems put in place to guide in terms of how well we govern our minerals, and that means that you have a lot of opaque actions happening. But there is need to emphasize transparency. And with the oil and gas sector, I think we've also seen government recently joining the EITI and also submitted its first report to the EITI, and has also made some amendments within its tax laws to ensure that we're able to maximize transparency but also reap sufficient revenue from the sector. It might not be as sufficient as expected, but how much we're able to achieve in terms of transparency within the sector, how much we are able to improve in terms of governance of the sector is what would actually help curb corruption, and at the end of the day ensure that we maximize benefits from the sector. And the EITI, if well utilized and implemented well, is one of the things that we see would help in terms of curbing corruption within the sector.
Let's now try to bend it a little bit and talk about agro-industrialization. Now, when you look at the recent reports, we are actually hitting a tune of around 1.4 trillion that is within the agro-industrialization sector. And I do understand that Siatini Uganda has been able to at least talk more of value addition in agriculture, pushing for all these agendas countrywide. But when you look at this, does this hold key to transform the agricultural industry for effective trade, for example, more so when it goes to value addition?
I think we've always come out as Siatini to call upon government to increase the budget, especially towards productive sectors like manufacturing, trade, and looking at specific entities such as the Uganda National Bureau of Standards that looks at the standards when it comes to some of the agricultural commodities that we're putting out on the market. And that has remained a challenge in terms of us ably accessing markets and putting our goods out there. So there is definitely a lot more that needs to be done to ensure that one, we meet the required quantities that are needed on the market, but also that as a country we are able to meet the standards that are required within the market, and government needs to do quite a lot of investment around that.
Okay. Now, lastly, I would wish to ask a question regarding transparency. How can transparency be enforced for effective revenue generation in the country? Because I believe we've talked topics of transparency in public offices, private sector, but how can we enforce it in the next financial year, for example?
As CSOs, when it comes to revenue, we've often called for government to continuously engage citizens when it comes to the revenue mobilization process. We've called for government to continuously share in terms of how much revenue has been collected, what it has been used for, and that is on one hand. And we've also often called for citizens to also follow the money, to see what the money is being used for. We've seen this working quite a lot, especially within some of the local governments that we've been engaging. And citizens are able to follow the money in terms of the projects that are being implemented, are they quality projects? But also, largely when we look at the central government, how is it how is it effectively putting to use the money that has been collected or paid by the citizens in form of taxes? Because if they see what their money is doing, if they're able to get improved services, get access to, say, water, agriculture extension services, then they're definitely going to be compelled to pay more taxes because they see what their money is doing. So transparency is very key, and it's very critical, and it's a role that has to be played by both government and the citizens. Government in terms of sharing information, but the citizens in terms of picking up the interest to follow the money as well.
All right, and maybe lastly, I would briefly say a Happy New Year to you, by the way. I think it is still early for us to wish you a Happy New Year.
Thank you.
But besides that, what next? 2023 is ahead of us, and the IMF had projected that we may face some recession globally. So when you look at it, which kind of advice would you give to the private sector players ahead of a year that hopefully we may recover from the shocks of COVID-19, of course the Russia-Ukraine war and all that?
The private sector players is to recognize the fact that we need to go beyond doing business as usual. They need to rethink in terms of their production, in terms of their businesses, rethink and see how they are able to work within the current context, but also looking at government in terms of what are some of the policies that it can put in place to support private sector growth amidst the current crisis. So there is need to critically do an assessment around that and ensure that we have the right policies in place, but private sector also rethinking some of the actions that they have planned.
All right, many thanks for being part of this entire discussion here in business today, and we send greetings to the whole team at Siatini, Uganda.
Thank you.
All right, and have yourself a blessed night, ma'am. Thank you very much. That has been Madam Grace Namugambe, tax expert at Seatini, Uganda. And of course, we've been discussing pretty much breakdown of the budget framework paper. And then the amount of money that has so far been discussed is 50 trillion Ugandan shillings. And if passed, that will be the exact amount for the next financial year, 2023-2024. Now, briefly, before we go into the break, if I'm to give you a little bit more of the domestic refinancing or the rollover by government, it is projected to increase from 8 trillion Ugandan shillings to 8.7% in financial year 2023-2024. That is an increase of about 790.9 billion Ugandan shillings. Now, there is also an estimation of a 6.1 trillion to be spent on interest payment, which is enough to cover 6 out of the 20 proposed programs amongst each. And of course, this was a report by the leader of opposition minority in regards to the budget committee report on the framework paper for the financial year 2023-2024. And it's a 50 trillion Ugandan shillings budget, which is yet to be approved. Business Today does continue immediately after the break. We have more reports coming up. Stick around. Good evening.
Smart 24, driving business.
The taste of Uganda in a new international park.
He must be rich, tall, handsome, from a respectable family. He must have a maid because at our home we do not work.
Conductor Masao.
Owa, obadde olobye ku ssimu.
Yamunange anti GOTV enkolera.
Nyumirwa omulembe omupya ogujjudde ebisanyusa omuli emikutu gya TV egisukka mu 8 n'egya radio nga kwotadde ne zifirimu ng'osinziirira wonna w'oli. Genda mu App Store oteeke app ya GOTV channels ku ssimu yo olwo onyumirwe ennaku 3 ng'olabira bwereere ewatali kozesa data.
GOTV channels.
Smart 24, driving business.
We'll be back from the break, and many thanks for keeping it Smart 24 TV. Now, let's continue with more business today. Now, we look at clean energy fishing technology. In a major shift towards sustainability in the agricultural sector, the fishing sector in Uganda is embracing clean energy harvesting technologies, leading to growth and development in the industry. This adoption by the sector is a positive step towards growth in the aquaculture industry. Bronia Katusime reports.
After delivering his remarks on the 42nd Tarehe Sita Day festivities, His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni urged the agriculture sector to use science and technology for effective production, which the fisheries industry is now investing in through the use of solar clean energy.
A new economy not just based on raw materials of agriculture and minerals, but also based on science and knowledge.
In recent years, Uganda's fishing industry has experienced a number of difficulties, including overfishing, the loss of fish species, and adoption of dangerous fishing techniques. However, it is anticipated that the adoption of renewable energy harvesting technologies would overcome these issues and advance sustainable fishing methods.
In deepening the adoption of this technology in Lake Victoria catchment and indeed other water bodies, but also to identify some of the bottlenecks that we have in promotion of this technology and to jointly find a solution between or amongst all of us on how we can promote this technology sustainably.
By using renewable energy harvesting methods, industry participants have made a huge stride towards sustainability, where previously they were utilizing kerosene in their fishing operations. The action is anticipated to benefit the industry's expansion and advancement. According to Daisy Achiro, the Senior Fisheries Inspector, Ministry of Agriculture, this adoption will address issues of water pollution.
We do not want pollution in the waters. And this is an avenue where we will address the problem of pollution, safety, and also we're thinking that it will be more cost effective because it is renewed using the sun, and we are already aware that in the landing sites or in the fishing community there is no electricity. So the issue of the battery charging was a bit challenging, but now with solar, which is everywhere, we think we will benefit a lot.
The use of solar light to fish is a technology that Uganda's fishing industry has adopted. This generates electricity using solar panels, minimizing reliance on fossil fuels and pollutants. The use of these lights is also anticipated to lower operational expenses, improving the economic viability of fishing.
Of course, we cannot delink economic with environmental, because now we are looking at environmental sustainability of our systems, and then using solar light is more preferred, because then kerosene, obviously there are bound to be spillages, but obviously at the same time we need to be mindful of the solar waste that comes with using solar.
It is anticipated that the deployment of technologies will increase sustainable fishing methods, resulting in a more commercially successful and environmentally friendly fishing industry. The solar light system may be costly at first, but manageable in the long run.
The cost analysis vis-a-vis the cost, and like if you're looking at buying it for the start, of course it will go for 750,000 Ugandan shillings. That looks a lot, but that is a one-time cost. If you break it down, like down the road 2-3 years, that is way too less or too affordable, considering that if someone is using kerosene, they have to buy it on a daily.
For a diverse market for our products, improving post-harvest handling infrastructure at different landing sites will help mitigate losses and ensure good quality. Bronya Katsime, Smart 24 TV, Business Today.
Now let's look at fixing the delivery cycle, especially around the parish development model. Implementation of the PDM has been dominated by inefficiencies. About 9,000 PDM savings and credit cooperatives out of the 10,594 have received funds of their banks, with the accounts amounting to 222.95 billion Ugandan shillings, and 1,050 SACCOs details have been bounced so far. Ronan Ahawe explores the success record so far.
The transformation into a money economy has had the government consider numerous development projects, including the parish development model, Emyoga, and other presidential initiatives on wealth and job creation dating back in 2019 and 2021, respectively. These intend to transform 68% of the homesteads from a subsistence to a money economy, and now 666 circles are in the final preparatory stages as 222.95 billion shillings lies unused on their bank accounts. The Secretariat, who oversees the operations and implementation of the government program, mentions that they have decided to take another course to disburse the funds due to the mismanagement, but assures Ugandans that all eligible circles will have their money deposited on their account by the end of this week.
This time around, we changed the modus operandi, we changed the approach. Now money, this financial year, comes straight from Ministry of Finance and goes straight to the SACCO account. Been hearing some bad publicity that money was stolen. There were just anomalies within the districts, and that is what we were avoiding earlier, so that there are no third parties or there is no middle person to the SACCO. So we eliminated that approach, and we eliminated the districts, money going through the districts, so it's going direct. That's number one. So we averted that issue of misappropriation or issues that come with money going through the district, the things that we've been hearing. That's number one. Number two, so far we rolled out and opened up circles in all parishes of the country. But to get onto the LFMS, there's a particular criteria that we set out, and there are things, a checklist that Ministry of Finance looks at. One is that you have to have an attestation form. You have to have a signed memorandum, financial agreement with the Ministry of Finance, that is the district. Three, that the name of the SACCO and the name of the bank account where the SACCO opened the account tally. So there were a bit of few anomalies, but just small issues that we were trying to sort out. So as we speak, about 9,500 SACCOs out of 10,594 have already received the money on their accounts, at least the 25 million for this financial year. Okay. Right now, as we are speaking, the 1,000 SACCOs that haven't yet received that money, right now we have a technical support team at Crescent Towers by Ministry of Finance that is helping them put them on IFMS and rectify those issues. So that by the end of the week, maybe Thursday, Friday, all SACCOs in the country should be able to receive all the monies for this particular quarter. In this particular financial year. The one of 2021-2022, there were different amounts that were saying because of the different issues that came up in the different districts. But that one is also being rectified.
In the same context, Ministry of Finance denotes that the most urgent need is ensuring that the approved PDM SACCOs, that is 8,878, quickly complete the four-step criteria, which includes identifying eligible beneficiaries, electing leaders and bank signatories to access and utilize funds seated on their accounts in 13 banks.
So people should not say, how do I get the money? Do I go to the cow? There is no money in the cow's office. There is no money at the sub-county. The money is at your parish. You access it by approaching the chairperson of your parish SACCO, and you submit an application. They will come and assess you. There is a vetting committee in the parish SACCO. Once they say this one qualifies, then you'll have an account. You don't go there and say, give me 100. No, you don't get money. The money will be posted on your account by your parish SACCO, according to the activity you want to invest in.
Previously, legislators chipped in expressing concern that such programs need to fully reflect the value of implementation. That is why it is imperative for the dynamics to match ground precedents, otherwise it would be pointless, partly because the money takes long to be disbursed.
There is no document to show that the money was given. So, although it's a good idea to address poverty and the home income, the government first mobilize sufficient resources to be allocated, and then members of parliament be told that in your constituency so much has come, but otherwise to remain politics on paper but not economics on the ground.
As per the Auditor General's report, a total of 29.5 billion shillings was wired to 3,249 existent PDM circles, and it was also established that 79.2 billion shillings was wired to 8,703 circles as revolving funds remained idle on bank accounts. Ronana Habwe, Smart 24 TV, Business Today.
And right now, let's have a recap of our top stories tonight.
In Business Today, trade, tourism and the extractives industry to benefit from arrangement therein. Infrastructure Committee dismisses work of fishes as composition of pulps becomes pertinent. Nefri, Energy Ministry and other players integrate solar energy in fish farming.
It is the 7th of February in the year of our Lord 2023. I'm Gerald Paul Sonko with Winnie Williams and Okauchi on sign language. We've been coming to you from the heart of the capital, Kampala, Plot 42 Nile Avenue here in Uganda. Have yourselves a blessed day and a good evening till tomorrow.